Boldwood presents One Hot Summer, written by Anita and read by Leslie Harcourt. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Among the notable things about fire is that it also requires oxygen to burn, exactly like its enemy, life. Thereby are life and flames so often compared. Otto Weininger. Chapter 1. Stop it, Ad! 14-year-old Shannon Ramsden tried to make her voice as firm as possible, but she was all too aware of the sensations at the bottom of her stomach and wasn't convinced she really wanted him to stop. "Me mum says I've not to let lads touch me, so just stop." She pushed him away, and for a moment he let her. She straightened her top, shoving her small, firm breasts back into the bra cups that had somehow ended up around her neck. "Can I put my hands in your knickers?" "No, you bloody can't! Me mum would go mad." "She won't know. You don't know my mum. She knows everything. She don't know we're in here." She looked around the creepy room again, all harmless enough in daylight, but the dim light from her phone made the shadowy stack of Lilos and kids' toys in the corner look spooky. And what if someone heard them? They were far enough away from her mum's watchful eye, perhaps, but the building was in someone's back garden. "You been here before?" she asked. "With another lass? You knew how to get in." He shook his head. She must be mad thinking that. He'd only ever wanted her since they'd started at infant school. "Course not. I come in here when it's raining, me and the other lads, but we have to be quiet. He don't know that side door's got a broken lock. He's a nasty piece of work, him that owns it." She settled back onto the sofa. "My mum knows him. He built it for his sister to live in, her and her kid. They lived here for about 6 months, then council gave her a house. It's as big as a house. You been upstairs?" She shook her head. "No, and I'm not going up. I know what you'll be thinking, Adam Lawton. Get me upstairs and I bet there's beds up there. It might be a wooden hut, but it looks like a house. I'm staying here." His hands went once again unerringly to her breasts, and she turned towards him. "You can touch me there, but nowhere else, right?" "Right," he said, and bent his mouth to her nipple. She gasped at the intensity of the feeling and shoved him away again. "I've got to go home." "Oh, not yet." He took hold of her hand and held it tightly against the front of his jeans. "Feel that?" he asked. "Bloody hell, Ad. That's you doing that to me. Take your knickers off, Shannon, just for 2 minutes." "No!" She struggled to her feet, trying to sort out her bra while he was clearly trying to get the offending knickers off her body and onto the floor. They heard the first bang and stopped. She looked at him. "What was that?" she whispered. "Fuck knows," he said, and returned to the issue of her knickers. A second bang was followed swiftly by 2 more. Flames whooshed from floor to ceiling in seconds, carried by the fumes of petrol. Shannon screamed once, then clasped her head as the flames turned her long brown hair into a halo of orange fire. She knew no more, didn't feel any pain as her clothes ignited into a huge ball. It took Adam 20 seconds longer to die than it did Shannon. The fire quickly spread throughout the wooden building. Neighbours who had heard the bangs and assumed they were gunshots came tentatively outside of their homes to see what was happening. Immediately, 5 different mobile phones rang 999, and 10 minutes later, 2 fire engines were on scene. The flames were huge, as befitted a bonfire of this stature. The firefighters searched for water hydrants and a way of safely getting into the rear garden of the house where the structure had been built. It wasn't easy and was hampered by the difficulty of access. One engine tried a different route when it became clear it wasn't a simple shed fire, as had originally been reported. When the summer house and decking in a neighbouring garden also caught fire, the second engine found a way around to the bottom of the garden via a derelict garage site. The first bangs had been heard at around 10 at night, and the fire was eventually under control by 1 in the morning. Alice Ramsden had watched the drama unfold with her neighbours, standing in the street sharing bottles of wine, with the odd tipple of Jack Daniels thrown in for good measure, enjoying the unexpected party atmosphere. She had briefly wondered why Shannon hadn't joined her, but guessed she preferred to stay in her bedroom, her location of choice these days, listening to her music. She wondered if every 14-year-old was like her daughter. She felt quite tipsy as she staggered back down her own path, trying to remember how many times her plastic tumbler had been filled over the last 3 hours. She hadn't had this much excitement in years. All the neighbours called loud goodnights to each other, and eventually the street returned to normal. Climbing the stairs made Alice giggle. The treads seemed a bit wobbly, just like her legs, she decided, and she eventually reached the landing. She couldn't see a light under Shannon's door, so reckoned she was asleep. Her daughter wouldn't appreciate being woken by a tipsy mother. Alice didn't surface until almost 10 on that overcast Sunday morning, and her first port of call was the medicine cabinet for the paracetamol. She switched on the shower and set it for hot, then had 10 seconds of cold. That was enough. She was now awake. She went downstairs to try to persuade Shannon to do her a bacon sandwich and a coffee, but the curtains were still closed, so she headed for the kitchen. There was silence from the downstairs rooms, so she called Shannon's name from the hallway. Surely that girl didn't intend spending the whole of Sunday shut away in her bedroom. There was no reply, and Alice wearily trudged back upstairs, her head beating a rhythm all of its own with every step. She knocked and pushed open her daughter's bedroom door. "Shan, you getting up yet?" Her daughter was still in bed, the duvet covering her entire form. Alice reached over and pulled it back, but saw only cushions. What the... She checked the bathroom, then ran downstairs. Grabbing her phone, she felt her legs begin to tremble, and she sank onto a kitchen chair. Why had she refused to give Shannon a mobile all these years? She'd call her now and give her merry hell, but at least she'd be able to find her. Instead, she called the first person she could think of. "Trev, is Shannon with you?" Her ex-husband laughed. "Hardly. We had a proper fallout on Wednesday, didn't she tell you?" "Oh, yeah, she did. You don't know where she is, then?" "No idea. What's wrong, Al?" "She's not in her room. She went up about 7 last night. Said she was going to watch Netflix. Then we had that big fire across the road, and I was outside, big crowd of us, from about 10 when it all kicked off to 1 this morning. I thought she was in bed, Trev." The last part came out as a wail. "You want me to come over?" "Of course I bloody do. She's your daughter as well, you know." Alice could hear her voice rising higher with each word she spoke. "We need to find her." "Give me a quarter of an hour." And Trev disconnected. Alice went back upstairs to Shannon's room and opened her wardrobe. There didn't seem to be any clothes missing, so she began to rifle through the chest of drawers. Nothing out of kilter there either. But finally she struck gold when she checked Shannon's desk. The central drawer contained a small diary, slim and about the size of a playing card. Alice glanced through it, but nothing much registered until she saw the entry for the previous night. Seeing ad, 8 p.m. in park. Park? Which park? And then realisation hit. It had been called the playground when they were in junior school, but now at 14 it had morphed into the park, playground being a bit too childish a word for teenagers. So Shannon had gone to meet Ad, who Alice presumed to mean Adam Lawton, in the broken-down old playground where children rarely played because of the smashed bottles and empty beer cans lying around. Where the hell was she now? She ran downstairs again and once more hit the call button, this time connecting with Kate Lawton. "Hi, Kate, it's me." "I know it's you, I can see it is." Kate laughed. "You okay after last night?" "Bit headachy. Is Adam there?" "He's not up yet. Can he ring you when he's awake?" "Kate, Alice said, trying to fight the panic she was feeling. "Can you go and check on him? Make sure he's okay?" There was a brief moment of hesitation, and Alice heard Kate speak to Harry, her partner, asking him to nip upstairs to check Adam was okay. "What's wrong, Alice? You're spooking me a bit." "It seems Shannon was meeting Adam last night, but Shannon isn't home. I've only just found out." "Hang on, I'm going upstairs." There was a clatter as Kate put her phone on the table, and then Alice heard her say, "Shit!" "Kate, are you there?" Alice yelled down the phone, and then she heard the unmistakable sound of it being picked up. "Alice, he's not in bed. I didn't check he was in last night when we got a bit worse for wear. I've no idea what we were all drinking, but I was almost asleep going upstairs. What the hell do we do? Ring the police?" Alice's heart sank. "Doesn't Adam have a phone either? He's left it in his room. I didn't know he was meeting Shannon, I swear. Do you know where they went?" "I know where they met, that old playground. They call it the park now. Trev's coming over. He'll go out looking for them. We'll come to yours. Harry can go with Trev. 2 heads and all that. We'll be there in 2 minutes. We'll find them, Alice, don't worry." Trev and Harry started at the park and trudged all around the estate talking to people, asking if they'd seen the 2 teenagers, but nothing came of it. They headed to Alice's, where they discovered Kate had returned home in case Adam arrived back at their house under his own steam, and Alice had been joined by her sister. Chrissy was making drinks and had just handed one to Alice when the men walked in. She took down 2 extra mugs and poured milk in them. "Anything?" Alice asked, fear etched on her face. Trev shook his head. "Nothing. There were some kids up on the park, but they hadn't seen them. Knew them, of course, about the same age. I've left my mobile with them in case they turn up there." Alice felt tears trickle down her face, and Trev pulled her close. "Hey, come on, she'll turn up. But, to be on the safe side, I think we need to ring the police. She's not been seen since, 7 last night? It's a long time." Chrissy stared at the 2 men. "The police? It'll take them a week to get here to talk to you." "Not for this," Trev said. "Too much bad publicity if they ignore missing kids." Alice couldn't hold her worry in any longer, and her wail reached all 4 corners of the room. Trev leaned across and pulled her towards him. "Come on, babes. We'll find her, and she'll be grounded for 6 months, if not years." The kitchen door burst open and Kate almost fell in. "The police are on their way. I rang them. They'll find them for us. They're coming here, so I've left a note for Ad in case he goes home while I'm here." Chapter 2. D.I. Laura Henshall from the Serious Crimes Unit at Mossway Police Station in the southeast of Sheffield tucked her long blonde hair behind her ears, screwed it into an elastic hairband, and stared at the burnt-out wreck of what had once been a shed, or so the owner, Dave Gordon, called it. The photograph he'd given her identified it as a shed that was house-sized, built along the lines of an Austrian chalet, with a huge clock adorning the peaked roof at the front. She had initially thought, wow, but then had followed it up with, how the fuck did he get away with building something of this size in the back garden? When she had mentioned this, he'd simply shrugged. It was clear the words building regulations weren't in his vocabulary. She wondered if the planning permission form had ever reached Sheffield City Council. The council estate had been built in the 50s. The houses were all much the same, brick-built, with newly replaced white UPVC windows and large gardens back and front. Many were now privately owned, no longer council housing. A chalet was not in keeping with the current aesthetic. The white crime scene tent had been placed over the spot where 2 bodies had been revealed in the cold light of the morning, despite the protestations of Mr. Gordon that nobody had been inside. "Mr. Gordon," her sergeant Will Peters was saying, "you're sure you have no idea who might have been inside your structure?" "No, it's a summer house that we only use in the summer when we put the swimming pool up. I have a big family. They come over and we make use of it then. But there was definitely nobody in it that I know of." She left Will to question him further. They wouldn't get much more, she was sure. Dave Gordon had a glazed look in his eyes as he stared through his lounge window at the activity in his back garden. Kenny Ellington, the pathologist, was coming out of the tent as she reached it. "Hi, Kenny, anything to tell me?" "2 bodies. That's about it until I get them back to my place. I'll start the post-mortem straight away. I think they're only kids, or very small adults. At a guess, I'd say teenagers. I have something for you that might help." He handed an evidence bag to Laura. "Looks like a small gold bracelet found on one of the victims. It might help with confirmation of who it is before we get the results back. I'll leave you to log it. Nobody's reported any kids missing?" "Not as far as I'm aware." She took her phone out of her pocket as it began to ring. "D.I. Henshall?" She listened for a while and then said, "Text me the address." As she spoke, she spotted Will emerging from the house and waved at him to join her. Kenny looked at her, understanding without being told what the phone call had been about. "2 kids missing?" She nodded. "Just across the road from here. I'm going down now to speak to the parents. It's a boy and a girl, both age 14. "Then I'm glad I've got my job and not yours," he said before heading back into the tent. She shook Trevor Ramsden's hand. "D.I. Laura Henshall, and this is D.S. Will Peters. We understand you have 2 missing children." Alice moved slightly so that she was closer to Trevor. "Our Shannon Ramsden, and Adam Lawton." Kate grasped Harry's hand. "And I'm Adam's mum, Kate," the other woman said. She indicated the 2 men in turn. "Trevor and Harry have been out looking for them." "Is it possible for us all to sit down, Mrs. Alice Ramsden," Shannon's mother replied. "How about in the lounge?" They followed the parents into the house. Will remained standing, his brown eyes ever observant as the others sat down around the room. Laura moved to a straight-back chair, effectively giving her control of the room. "Were the 2 children together?" "It seems they were," Alice said. "Although we didn't know. I thought Shannon was home in bed. I found Shannon's diary in her desk that said she was meeting Adam at 8 last night. They've grown up together," she wailed. "He won't hurt her. Where are they?" Trevor pulled Alice close, as if sensing something was coming. "There is no easy way to say this," Laura said, keeping her voice as gentle as she could. "But there was a fire last night in a summer house down the road. We have found 2 bodies in the ruins of the building." She removed the evidence bag from her jacket pocket and showed it to all of them. "Do any of you recognise this bracelet?" Alice moaned loudly and stared around her in utter panic, as if hoping to see her child come through the door and prove she wasn't one of the bodies. "Yes! It belongs to Shannon. It was a Christmas present from me last year." "Thank you, Alice." Laura slipped the bag back into her pocket. "Where?" Trevor said. "Where are our kids?" "They are currently being transported to the morgue, where a post-mortem will take place later today. To help with identification, I would like to take samples of DNA from both mums, please. I must stress at this stage we have no positive ID on them." Alice and Kate looked at each other, horror etched on their faces, hoping they were getting the wrong end of the stick with what this woman was telling them. "They're dead," Kate whispered, as she felt Harry let go of her hand and place his arm around her shoulders. "But we sent for you to help us find them, to bring them back home to us from whatever stupidity they were up to. How can they be dead?" "This is the stupidity, isn't it?" Trevor said, ignoring the tears running down his face. "They were in that bloody fire, weren't they? That bloody overgrown shed Dave thought it was so fucking clever to build." Alice seemed to fold into herself. "I was outside drinking wine and having a laugh, watching the firemen, picking out the best ones when all the time—" "Mrs. Ramsden," Laura said as gently as she could, It won't benefit anyone if you start thinking along those lines. Now you can help Shannon by giving me a DNA sample and let us fight for her from here on in. We will look after her, as we will look after Adam, but we do need official confirmation. I'm so sorry. The two women looked at each other again and both nodded. Will Peters stepped forward, his dark brown hands holding 2 DNA sample kits, and Laura breathed a sigh of relief that she hadn't had to fight them over the issue. There will be a family liaison officer with both families within half an hour of my leaving. They will keep you informed every step of the way, and I promise you we will find out what has happened to your children. Alice walked upstairs and headed to her bedroom window. She could see across 2 gardens to where the fire had been a few short hours earlier. The property was hemmed in by crime scene tape, but she could see the white tent being taken down in the back garden. She watched until it was all packed away, then leaned her head against the window pane and sobbed. Trevor had gone back home to tell Molly what had happened, but said he would be back later. Even in her grief, Alice had managed to say, "Oh, don't bring that cow back with you." Molly stared at Trevor. "You're going back to her? To Alice?" "Just for tonight. I'll sleep on the sofa, but I can't leave her on her own. I just can't. We've lost our Shannon, for fuck's sake, Moll. Our Shannon." She bit back a retort, folding her arms around the bump that used to be her flat stomach. "And what if I need you?" "You've 2 months to go, Moll. You're not going to need me. But if you do, ring me." He pushed a clean T-shirt into his holdall and zipped it up. "If you need me, ring me." Molly changed tactics. "I'm so sorry about Shannon. You know that, don't you?" He nodded. "She was a lovely girl. Looking forward to meeting her new baby brother. I'll miss her." "So that's it, is it? You'll miss her?" "I'm aching for her, Moll. She's my daughter, for fuck's sake. Aching for her. And I've got to be with Alice at this time, so I don't want hassle about this." He picked up the bag and headed out of the bedroom. "I'll ring you." Laura and Will walked across the road from the Ramsden house and up the small road opposite for about 50 yards until she reached the home of Dave Gordon, briefly wondering how the parents would be able to ever move on with their lives while living in such close proximity to where the children met their deaths. Dave Gordon was sitting in his car, which was parked on a grass verge across from his own home and outside the boundary created by the crime scene tape. The engine hadn't been started. He was simply staring at his house. Laura knocked on the window and he rolled it down. "Mr. Gordon, we'd like a quick word." He flicked his head backwards. "You can get in the back seat." "No, we'd like you to come with us." "Is your house locked up?" Dave looked startled. "It is. You want me to come now?" "We do." Laura opened the driver's side door. "We shan't be too long. We're only going round to Moss Way Police Station, but we do need a formal statement and to ask a few questions." Dave eased his large frame out of the car and followed the 2 police officers to their vehicle. Laura spotted the arrival of Bernie Granger, the PC allocated to the Ramsden family as FLO, and indicated to Will she was popping down to speak to the young PC. Bernie locked her car and looked up with a smile as she recognised her superior. "Morning, boss. Any instructions?" "Not really. We don't know anything yet, but they're obviously in a state. The mum, Alice, lives here with her daughter, the now deceased Shannon, although ID hasn't been officially confirmed. I'm 100% sure it will be. Alice identified a bracelet found on one of the bodies. Divorced from Trevor, but not estranged. They still talk. He was here, but now gone to his new partner to fill her in on what's happening. He may come back, reading between the lines. Liaise with Ava Dukes. She's FLO at Adam Lawton's house. His mum is called Kate. Ring if you need anything else. We're just taking in the chap who had the fire. Got some questions for him, so he's not happy. We'll be asking if he's upset anybody enough to result in this." Bernie smiled. "I'll report in later. I'll stay here as long as they need me." "Thanks, Bernie. See you later." Laura drove the 2-minute journey to Moss Way without any words been spoken. Will was never quiet. He always had something to say. But today there was silence, and she breathed a sigh of relief when she pulled the car into the car park. "Will, can you book Mr. Gordon in and make sure he has a coffee, please?" "Yes, boss." He opened the rear door to let out their client and waited until Dave shuffled himself out.
"Bloody child lock at my age,"
Dave grumbled.
"And it don't take sugar."
Will grinned at him, his brown skin creasing into his usual smile. "You've not tasted our coffee. You might be begging for sugar by the end of it." He led Dave through the front door and gave his name to the PC on duty before leading him in to be formally admitted into the inner workings of the busy police station.
"David Owen Gordon,"
he said.
"Unfortunate set of initials,"
the duty sergeant said.
"Welsh mother was a bit thick,"
Dave responded glumly. He was escorted to an interview room while Will disappeared to get him a sugarless coffee. He collected 2 teas for himself and Laura, and after delivering the sludge-like coffee, he headed upstairs to Laura's office. It was quiet in the main office. Sundays were usually subdued, with a skeleton crew of officers keeping things running, and others on call should they be needed. Monday would be busy, once they started to get results in from the fire. In the meantime, he had already tasked the few officers available to him with checking who had CCTV in the area and knocking on doors. Nobody seemed to believe for 1 minute that the 2 youngsters killed in the fire had been anything but victims, and he didn't want to imagine the horror for them as they had become engulfed in the flames that had devoured the entire structure. It would have been quick, and they wouldn't have suffered, but just for those few seconds they would have known. He glanced across towards Laura's office and saw she was speaking to DCI Knight, so he left the teas on his desk and walked over to the window. It looked down onto the police car park, and then over to the much larger car park of Asda, busier than usual on this bright and warm Sunday morning. Barbecue plans for the shoppers, he suspected. He heard Laura's door open and the clipped tones of the DCI.
"Keep me informed, Laura. If you need more people, just shout. We need to solve this one quickly."
"Of course, sir," she said, and turned towards Will. "Will and I are about to go downstairs to talk to the owner of the property. We'll see if he has anything enlightening to say." Chapter 3. Will placed the paper cups on Laura's desk. "Can we have 10 minutes before we go downstairs?" "No, please. We need to talk to him." "We need to talk to each other." Will was adamant. "It was a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't something we hadn't thought about before. It was the right time, the right moment, the right place, and we can't ignore what happened. Tell me this, Laura Henshall, boss. Would you change anything about last night if you could?" She picked up her tea, but her hands were shaking. She sipped at it very carefully. "It can't happen again." "It will." "Will, there's all sorts of reasons why we can't be together. I'm your boss, you're married, and..." She paused to think. "And I'm older than you." "And that's it." "Isn't that enough?" "Is there a rule that says I can't sleep with my boss?" "Good Lord, even DCI Knight sleeps with his boss." "She's 1 rank above him. She's his wife and she's at Central." "Okay, you're 1 rank above me. And if necessary, I'll put in for a transfer to Central." "I'm serious about this, Laura." "Will, we've slept together once." She closed her eyes for a moment. "Last night. All night with my beautiful sergeant." He was relentless. "And as for being older than me, how old are you?" 36 next birthday." "It was your birthday last month, so you're just 35. I'm 35 in 3 months. That makes you 4 measly months older than me. Doesn't count at all." A smile crossed his face. "And it was all night, with my beautiful DI. You have a remarkably comfortable bed, Laura Henshall." Would you like me to help you shake up your duvet before you get back in it tonight? No, stop it, Will. I can't think straight this morning, and have to find out who killed 2 kids, and you're conveniently skirting around the issue of being married. It's not a marriage and you know it. It's a convenience, and I'll walk away right now if that's what it takes to convince you. We live together, half a house each. I hardly see her, let alone speak to her. She's still your wife. That can change in an instant. It was our agreement. We're so far apart, Laura. There might as well be an ocean between us. Don't bring that up as an excuse. This has been growing between us for some time, you know it has. Everything you're bringing up as a reason can be sorted, except you'll always be 4 months older than me. Finally, the smile reached both her lips and her eyes. You good at shaking up duvets? Excellent. I've waited for this, us, to develop for so long, Laura. Don't push me away now. We have to hide it. I know. I've had plenty of practice. I've hidden how I feel for months. She gave a slight nod. Think I don't know? I want to kiss you. And I want to kiss you, she acknowledged. But that's the truth of it, really, isn't it? We can't. Let's go and interview this idiot who built an Austrian chalet in his back garden, then upset somebody enough that they burnt it down. Dave Gordon had pushed the almost full cup of coffee to one side. Crap that, he said. I did warn you, Will said, and sat beside Laura, facing Dave. Will read him his rights, much to Dave's surprise. What's going on? Dave asked when Will finished speaking. You accusing me of something? No, just protecting your rights. Laura leaned forward and opened her notebook. So, Dave, you built a chalet, a double-storied building at the end of your back garden. Why? My sister was waiting for a council house for her and the little one. They had nowhere to stay, so I built that for them as a temporary thing. They were in it less than 6 months, and after that we used it as a summer house. My kids, who live with their mother, came over to use the swimming pool, but that's buggered as well now. It melted. You heard the bangs? Not really. I thought I heard something, a bang or two, but there's always somebody setting off fireworks for birthdays. Didn't register as out different to that. It was only as I went into my kitchen, which looks out onto the road, and saw a neighbour's car reflecting flames that I went to investigate. By this time it was a massive fire, and I got my kids up, rang for the fire brigade. They said they'd already been called. There was furniture and stuff in it. I lost a lot of personal things. Were you aware other people could get in? No, bloody wasn't. Who were they? You haven't been told by neighbours? No. I've only seen that cow from over the back who's lost her summer house and her decking. She had a right go at me. Said I'd got to pay for it all to be replaced. Yeah, she'll be waiting a long time. Ain't been told what? The 2 who died. They are 14-year-olds from 2 of the houses at the bottom of your road. Adam Lawton and Shannon Ransden. This hasn't been officially confirmed yet by DNA, but they are missing from home. So I suggest you think twice about where you go from here. You can't stay in your home until we've cleared it as a crime scene, which could be a few days. They'll be searching your property as soon as possible. Laura didn't think twice about telling the small lie. She needed to see his reaction to a house search. What? My house? It's a crime scene, Dave. You anything to hide? No. I can't get back in. No. I wouldn't advise it anyway. These 2 kids died in your chalet, and both kids have angry parents who will want to know what's going on. Unless you have those answers, I won't go back there. You have the answers, Dave? I can't tell you anything. He dropped his head into his hands. I don't even know how they got in without me knowing. It was only because it wasn't so warm yesterday that I wasn't in it. We usually have somebody from the family over on a Saturday night, have a few beers and a swim. I said not to bother, it was looking like rain. The thought hit him like a train. My God, I could have killed half my family if I'd said come over. Indeed. Laura's tone was crisp. So, have you upset anybody recently? Only that cow over the back. Seems I'm always upsetting her. Don't even know her name.
Apart from her, can't think of anybody.
Why did you upset her?
She said my
Chalet, Dave, is slightly bigger than a shed.
Whatever. She said it was stopping the sun at the top of her garden, right where they'd built their summer house.
And you don't know her name?
No. She lives at number 20, though.
Laura and Will both stood. We'll be back in a bit, Dave. We'll bring you a tea this time.
Thanks. Will I be here much longer?
Shouldn't be. Depends if they've found anything at your place.
Not giving much out, is he?
Will pursed his lips, deep in thought. They sipped at their drinks as they stood watching Dave, bravely drinking his tea with a grimace.
He doesn't seem to like our tea either.
Bit picky, isn't he? Doesn't like the tea, doesn't like the coffee. Wonder what he'll say to our accommodation if we keep him overnight.
You planning on that?
She shrugged. We don't have any grounds to. Do you feel as if he knows something he's not saying? Let's wind him up a bit. Suggest we've maybe found something. See what happens then.
I do feel as if he's keeping something back. I feel that about most people. It's up to us to tease it out of him, I suppose, but...
OK. When we go back in, I'll try to get a rise out of him. Torment him a bit. And if he gets stroppy, I want you to stand up. Be a bit threatening. Lean across the table, that sort of thing. Intimidating.
You think that will work?
I don't know, but it means I can look at your butt and those Levi's while you're leaning across.
Will choked as he swallowed his tea. Is this your version of keeping what happens between us out of the workplace?
Yep. Just keep looking forward and drinking your drink, and nobody will ever know we're talking about 12 hours in my bedroom last night, and the delicious toast and coffee you made me this morning at 7 o'clock, or the fact that we could potentially be doing it all over again tonight, while this poor sod is languishing in custody. Shall we go back in?
I can't, he said. I can't move from this spot at the moment. He said nobody will ever know. They will if they see the front of these Levi's right now. You didn't tell us about the drugs, Dave. It seems we've found a tidy stash. No, you haven't. If you've found anything, it's a little bit of weed, and it's for personal use. Helps with the pain.
What pain?
I've got a bad knee. Came off a motorbike a few years ago. Did a lot of damage.
So the white powder's icing sugar? Dave stood and banged his hand down hard on the table.
There's no drugs. If you've found some, you've had them planted. That'd be about right for South Yorkshire Police, wouldn't it?
Will stood and leaned across the table, forcing Dave to sit back down. Laura stifled a smile and risked a quick glance to her right. The view was good.
Unfortunately, South Yorkshire Police follow the letter of the law, and we're going to keep you here overnight while we follow up the full forensic report from your home. And your car.
Will spoke quietly, adding the last 3 words as almost a throwaway comment. Dave visibly blanched.
You've taken my car?
We have. We're nothing if not thorough at South Yorkshire Police. Get it, Dave? Don't ever knock South Yorkshire Police in my presence, pal. You'll only live to regret it. Have we had the car report yet, D.I. Henshall? Laura pretended to check her notes and confirmed it wasn't through at that time. D.S. Peters, can you go and chase it up, please? Will stood and left the room, followed a minute later by Laura. You've organised it to be collected? She asked.
Certainly have. He went white when we mentioned the car. He either put something in it this morning when we found him sat in it, or it's something that he keeps permanently in the car. One way or another, we'll have answers by tomorrow morning.
That would be after we get through tonight, would it? She grinned. Come on. Let's go in and see if we can wind him up a bit more.
Do I need a solicitor?
Dave's sharp words echoed around the interview room. Do you want one, Dave? We can stop this right here and now. Get you one of your choice or a duty solicitor. But either way, you're here for the night. So you may as well start thinking about what McDonald's meal you want tonight. Laura stared at him, almost daring him to come back with some clever comment. Instead, he crumpled.
No, I don't want a fucking solicitor. I want to go home. Somebody burnt down my shed, and it seems I'm getting the blame for it. If I'd done that, D.I. Henshall, I'd have been on the run Saturday night.
Then enjoy your McDonald's, and we'll be back in the morning to finish interviewing you.
His head slumped down onto the table, and they quietly left the room. Chapter 4. Alice handed Trevor a mug of tea and sat down in the armchair facing him. Her face looked grey, and she sat without speaking. "You can sit next to me," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I'll sit here. I can manage without you, you know. I've done it for 2 years now." "Well, I've told Molly I'm staying here tonight." Bet she was chuffed. She trusts me. Then she's an idiot. I trusted you. What you did to me, you'll do to her. She can't be so daft as to not see that. I've changed. Balls! He sipped at his drink. "You put arsenic in this?" "No, only bromide." "You never change, Alice. Always got an answer." Tears came into her eyes. "I haven't got a daughter now." "We, Al, we. Shannon was ours. It's why I'm here now." "How come we didn't know she was seeing Adam?" "I've been thinking about it, and there's nothing else in her diary about meeting him. Maybe she wasn't seeing him before last night." She rubbed at her tears with the back of her hand. "They've always been good friends, but this is something new. Was something new. I don't think Kate guessed either. We would have made a joke of it if she had. We always said we'd buy matching hats for the wedding." Alice's head dropped and she sobbed. "Now there'll be no wedding, no future, nothing. How do we go on without her?" He sighed and stood up, pulling his ex-wife up at the same time and enfolding her into his arms. She leaned her head against him. "I've no answer, Al. I can't think beyond this minute right now. But know this. I'll always be here for you, no matter what." He repeated the words that night as they lay in bed together for the first time in 2 years. She said no, but he said she hadn't used enough bromide. So she said yes. Kate didn't go to bed. For 2 hours she sat in Adam's bedroom, not touching anything, just sitting on his bed. At first her head was up against his headboard, but slowly she sank down, clutching his pillow that smelled of him, that brought him a little closer. She thought of their years together, the first 5 with his bastard of a father, 4 where there had just been the 2 of them, and the last 5 with Harry, the man he now called Dad. The bedroom door moved slightly, and she saw Harry peering around it. "You awake? I've brought you a cuppa." She nodded, but didn't move, so he walked across and placed the cup on the bedside table. He sat on the edge of the bed and leaned down to kiss her. "Move, don't move, it doesn't matter. The drink's there, but you don't have to drink it, and I'm going nowhere. I'm downstairs, that's all." "Thank you," she whispered. "Did Adam tell you? Did you know he was meeting Shannon?" "No, I promise you I didn't. I thought he was on his PlayStation, if only..." Kate pushed herself up the bed, and Harry waited before passing her the drink. "I can do you a sandwich or something." "No, I'm fine." "But you've had nothing all day." "I'll eat when I feel more like it. I don't want anything right now. I just want to go to sleep and forget today's happened." She sipped at her tea. "I'll run a bath, I think, and go straight to bed." "Your mum rang. She's coming tomorrow." "Oh, God, no. She'll fuss over me. Can't you ring her back and tell her we're okay?" He smiled his gentle smile. "No, I can't. Adam was her grandson. She has a right to be here." "She's staying in our house?" Her face seemed horror-struck. "She is. We'll cope for a few days." "A few days?" "Kate, she's your mum, And she loves you and Adam, no matter what she's like in the rest of her brain.
But I like her being in Glasgow and me in Sheffield, she wailed. Is anybody else wrong?
Lots of people. It seems the Chinese whispers are getting going. And I think it's because Trev and I spoke to a lot of their friends when we were out this morning looking for them. People have heard about the fire and what they found. The school is closed tomorrow. They're arranging counselling for any kids that may need it, and arranging a special assembly for Tuesday morning where they'll talk to the kids. The police will be in attendance and talking to their friends. She clutched at his hand.
I'm sorry. I've left you all day to deal with this crap while I've wallowed in here.
Wallow where you want to wallow. I'll take up the slack. I've spoken to Trev. He's staying on the sofa tonight at Alice's, so she's not on her own.
Good. The family liaison officer will be here tomorrow morning and will report if anything new's turned up. She seems nice.
Can't even remember her name. I'll try and be a bit more sociable after I've had a sleep, if I manage to drop off.
Kate took another sip of her drink. It's going round and round in my head. Who the hell hated Dave enough to throw those petrol bombs? Alice's house faces the bottom of that road. Wonder if she's checked her security camera.
I imagine the police will have. There's 1 or 2 round here who have them, so they'll be looking at all of them. The police took Dave's car away earlier, and I haven't seen him come back. Tape's still wrapped all around it.
Kate replaced the now empty cup on the bedside table and grasped Harry's hand. Thank you. I needed that. I'm going to run a bath now, have a long soak, cry a few more tears, then go to bed.
Sounds like a plan. I'll lock everything up after I've put out the bin, and we'll call it a day. And if you wake in the night, you wake me, understand?
She nodded. I do, and I will. She stood and wobbled. He put out his hand to steady her, and she sank down onto his knee, wrapping her arms around his neck. I love you, Harry, she said. Dave Gordon didn't sleep much. He knew his 2 kids were safe with their mother, but he guessed she would use this as another excuse to deny him access to Stacey and Freddie. It didn't take much to have her threaten him with not being able to see them again, and he lived for those kids. He'd have to get it put onto a proper footing, taking it through court instead of living week by week according to her whims and fancies. The kids had loved his garden house, had helped him build it. Little Freddie was a dab hand with a hammer, had his own little toolkit and everything. Stacey had chosen the curtains, and he shivered at the thought that if the evening had been a little warmer, he and his precious children would have been in the garden, possibly in the wooden house when the bombs were thrown. Everybody knew he used it on a Saturday night. They could hear the kids jumping in the pool, shrieking with laughter. Whoever threw those bombs had known who would likely die. Dave couldn't control his thoughts. He tossed and turned on what the custody sergeant had laughingly called a bed, trying to cope with the heartburn created by eating the Big Mac meal a shade too fast, and wondered what would happen next. What would happen next was really that they would take his car apart. And they would find the gun. His fingerprints weren't on it, that he knew for a fact. But just whose fingerprints were? His thoughts drifted, and he decided he would simply deny all knowledge of it, ask where it was found, and when they said under the spare tyre, he would say that's why he knew nothing about it. He'd never had occasion to move the spare tyre in the 6 months he'd had the car. Then he'd hammer Vince Taggart, probably with a sledgehammer for pushing it on him to hide it. Never again would he get drunk with Taggart. He'd always got something he needed help with, and throughout that long night of tossing and turning every which way on that tiny mattress, Dave Gordon recognised his life had to change, even if only for the sake of his kids. Plans for tomorrow? Will leaned across and kissed Laura. I'm not going to look at your bum. OK, that's plan number 1. Any reason for that? It distracts me. Secondly, we have to release our Mr. Gordon, unless we find anything we can charge him with. We'll have the forensics on most of the stuff we've asked for in the morning. Then it's checking CCTV, door to door, looking for vehicles that shouldn't be there. It's not easy carrying petrol bombs in carrier bags. They'd have used a car, I'm thinking. The general consensus is there were 4 loud bangs, ergo 4 bombs. They really meant it, didn't they? Certainly did. Pass me your glass and I'll top it up. Laura reached to her bedside table, drained the last bits from the glass and handed it to him. He swung his legs out of bed and refilled both their glasses. Your skin is